What's up, Bears fans, draft fans, and all those in between? As you saw there on our open, we got a little partnership that we're getting together with Danny. So it's called the Tally brand, and Aldo reached out to Rob, the man behind the Tally, because he loves the product, and he asked if we could do a little partnership and get his merch out there and get his website some recognition. So we're doing a little bit of a trial run the next couple of weeks between now and the draft for our draft coverage. When Rob agreed with Aldo, he reached out to each of us to pick a hat. I picked the hat, the bold shy. I love the way it looks, the CHI. And what I really love is the GSH on the side, because that's one of my favorite things about our jersey is the homage to Papa Bear that we give each and every time we take the field. So I just love that he added that in there. And usually I'm not a flat bill hat guy, but I figured I'd try it out. And my son and my wife both were like, "Hey, it doesn't actually look that bad."
Looks
So
good, man.
that's why I picked this one out. And why'd you pick yours out, Danny? I see you got the GSH as well.
Yeah, I'm more of a I'm not a flat bill hat kind of guy. I tried it one time, it didn't look right on me, but man, it looks good on you, man. So keep rocking that. And obviously, yeah, like this, I like the GSH. I like the trucker, the mesh, fitting in the back. It's snap back. It's adjustable. It fits good. I usually like wear my hats backwards, but I wanted to wear this one forward so we can promote Tally brand. But yeah, these are awesome hats. Actually, my son too saw my hat and he's like, "Hey, I want one of those." I think there was a Caleb one that he wants, so I'm going to go on. I'm going to go on Tally Brand's website there and get him that Caleb hat. But yeah, these are sweet hats. So if all your Bears fans out there, you like these hats, jump on Tally Brand. I think we have the website here. If we have the website here.
Yeah, you can check out all the merch. They got hats, they got shirts, they got hoodies. I think I saw flags on the website. It's tallybrand.com, TALLEYBRAND.com. You can get on there and check it out. Really looking forward to working with this guy, Rob, and trying to get his brand out there. And also, I mean, I'm a hat guy. You always see me in a hat, so it's a perfect brand for me to promote. And Danny, you got a little something extra in the mail, didn't you? You want to tell us about what
I want to give a little shout out. Obviously, guys, listen to this whether live here in the chat or as a recording. Remember that Tally brand. These are sweet hats, comfortable, easy to fit. Whether you like the flat bill like AC's rocking, or you like the little curve, trucker hat and mesh back there, you guys check it out. But I also want to give what's that?
We got Tally brand in the chat.
Hey, thank you. We love these hats, man. Awesome product. Awesome so far. I also want to give one more shout out to a dedicated barroom listener, a long-time barroom listener, and that is Brandon Lawson. Hopefully Brandon's in the chat too. We got these sweet hoodies, myself and AC. I don't know if you can see it. It says, it says "get comfortable, being uncomfortable." Obviously, that is a phrase from or a line from the infamous Ben Johnson opening press conference, where he kind of looked at Caleb and the rest of the team and gave him these quotes. And that's it's been living out there. So far so good for year one. But these are sweet jerseys. I was gonna put it on and wear it, but it's too damn hot today here. So I'll be dying. It'd be like a sauna in here if I put this on right now. But it's sweet, looks good. Brandon, again, big time barroom listener. Appreciate the support. Me and him have communicated via Twitter and go back and forth. I do appreciate this. Love this hoodie. Thank you so much. Just want to give Brandon a big shout out there.
Yeah, shout out to Brandon Lawson. I got one as well. With the weather being jumping back and forth, like you said, Danny, right now it's really hot, but maybe in the morning it'll be like, I think Sunday it's supposed to be like 40 in Chicago. So that's perfect hoodie weather. And the hoodie says, get comfortable being uncomfortable. But on the contrary, those hoodies are so soft and they feel so good. And I'm a hoodie guy as well. So I'm loving the way all this stuff is going.
Especially in the wintertime, man. In wintertime, pack on some weight, especially here in the Midwest, it gets a little cold. Your body wants a little weight to kind of feel a little warmer. Now I'm coaching my son's flag football team, and Sunday's going to be like 50, so that's going to be perfect weather to wear that hoodie out there. So, Brandon, again, thank you. Tally Brand, thank you again. We appreciate all the merch and the swag for sure.
Absolutely. So, today, myself and Danny are planning on covering the corner position, but Danny, we're a week and a half from draft season.
Week from Thursday.
Yeah, so I know you're not a mock draft guy, but everybody knows AC is a mock draft guy. I've been reading.
How many have you done, AC? Be honest. How many have you done?
I don't keep track, but I mean, I'll just flip it up there.
You know it's a lot when you say I don't keep track. So right there, it's.
It is a lot. It's definitely a lot. But to me, because I'm not a scout, so I don't have the tape of all these guys, but to me, it allows me to kind of see who they think's going to be around in our area that I can start looking into. Because, like you know, Danny, there's guys on our list that we really like, but there's no shot they're going to be there at 25. So it kind of gives me a shot to see who's going to be around us. So I pulled some mock drafts. Eric Edholm put his out. He's the guy we had on just last week right here on Draft on Tap. I grabbed Mel Kiper's on there. I know a lot of people don't like him, but
the Godfather, Godfather. Come on, he's the OG. He's the OG of this stuff.
He's the guy who really put draft coverage on the map. So I grabbed his mock, and of course I grabbed Daniel Jeremiah from NFL as well. So we'll jump right into it. Eric Edholm has us taking Zion Young. We talked about it last week, a Missouri defensive end, and he says, assuming they don't make a bigger offseason splash on a veteran, think the edge rusher could be there for round one target. GM Ryan Poles was camped out by the pass rush one-on-ones for much of the Senior Bowl week, and the long-framed Young stood out to me in Mobile a hair more than Clemson's TJ Parker. What are your thoughts on Zion Young, and do you think it'd be a good pick for us at 25, Danny?
Yeah, we talked about it. Eric and I talked about it on our show when he was on here, and how he likes Zion Young. I like Zion Young as well. It's just the he's more of that rugged power, edge defender guy. That guy, in terms of measurable, 6'6", 262, 33.5-inch arms. He has the prerequisite dimensions, in terms of what DA likes at defensive end. So he's a power rusher. He's a guy that had 6.5 sacks last year. But you don't see much, in terms of speed and quickness and bend. But he's more of a guy that'll get into the chest of the offensive lineman and just walk him back and bully him into the quarterback. So, like I said, 6.5 sacks last year. There were some talk recently about some of his pro day stuff that didn't look too impressive in terms of some of the numbers he put out. So, while Zion Young could be an option at 25, there's more of a likely chance that he'll probably be available at the top of that second round. That's the scuttlebutt you pick up now. We're here, heading towards the first round of the draft a week from Thursday. So, I think, I think at this point, 25 might be a bit too high, but obviously I wouldn't be surprised if that is an option, because again, he fits the physicality, he fits the profile in terms of the size and length. The one thing that, I keep being asked about some of these players that are, intriguing prospects, but DA's got a type for defensive end. He's got a frame. They have to have the frame. They have to have the length. They have to have the physicality. Some of these guys may have the athleticism, some of the bend that a Zion Young doesn't have, but Young has exactly that. He has that physicality that DA likes at the point of attack.
Yeah, I agree completely with everything you just said there about Zion Young. Mel Kiper Jr., for the record, has us taking Zion Young as well. He puts his stats up there, and he talks about Montez Sweat getting to 10 sacks last year. After Dio Dangbo, who was hurt for a lot of the years, there's just not a whole lot there for us. So that's why he has us picking Zion Young, and you don't have to get back into it. But Daniel Jeremiah has us taking Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety out of Toledo. He says McNeil Warren has the size, length, and playmaking ability to fill the void left by Jaquan Brisker. In fact, I believe EMW would be an upgrade at the position. What are your thoughts, Dan? I know you're not a huge safety in the first round guy, but what are your thoughts on EMW?
I'm not a huge safety. I feel like every show or every year during the draft, I have to clarify my stance. All right. The safety position is a position, to me, if you're a team that has a good front seven, right? If you're the Texans, for example, one of those teams that can get after the quarterback, and you haven't needed safety, first round you can go and get a safety.
Right.
The Vikings are a team that has a pretty good front seven in terms of getting after the quarterback. So they might go for a safety here in the first round. But for the Bears, it's not that the safety is not needed. It is a primary need. It's just that the front seven, there's so many holes up front. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I always say all the time, but you can have Ed Reed and Ronnie Lott in their prime back there. If those front seven guys cannot get after the quarterback, it doesn't really matter. So, but this draft does have, in my opinion, 2 first-round safeties. That's Caleb Downs out of Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And I know there's some scuttlebutt about his possible issue with his knee, or some scuttlebutt about, in terms of athletic numbers aren't the greatest. But this kid's a player. This guy, if you can start as a freshman on Nick Saban's defense, you can start. This guy, he's a dude, right? So he's a first-round pick. And Dylan Thieneman, who I just posted his report on Shimon Pascal last night. He's a guy that's really impressive in terms of athletic ability. Also a guy that triggers quickly downhill, can cover tight ends, backs, anybody, you name it, out of the backfield and out of the slot. So those to me are 2 first-round picks. So, would it shock me that if one of those 2 guys somehow drops to the Bears at 25, they go for it? It wouldn't shock me. But damn it, they better go all defensive line the rest of their picks,
right?
Because they got to do something, or comes after the draft, go back out on veteran free agency and pick up something, because they got some holes up there. And I understand they made some free agent signings in terms of the interior with Gallimore and Street and Lynch and some of these guys, but these are guys are either backup depth guys, rotational guys. They're not guys that are going to come in here and fortify the interior of the defensive line, in my opinion. So I think for me at least, inside is a bigger need than the edge. But I either way, you got to get after the quarterback, got to provide pressure. And the quickest way, the most disruptive way to get into the quarterback's face is up the middle. So that's why I think defensive tackle is something that they still need.
I agree. And Caleb Downs, like you said, to start as a freshman in Nick Saban's defense, and then to go from that to Ohio State under I can't remember his name, the defensive coordinator that used to be the head coach of the Lions. He wasn't much of a head coach, but his defense was really advanced for college football. Pencil in his ear. I can picture him.
Now you got me thinking. I know who you're talking about. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on his name as well. I can't believe it. It's Go ahead.
Well, he goes and runs that defense as well. So they say his number 1 trait is he's got the brain. He's a really smart playmaker, and of course he's athletic enough to make all the plays that you want. And like you said, Thieneman is just an athletic freak, and that would give them. I think Greg Gabriel's kind of touched on it on his show is he feels like Dennis Allen really wants, and I think you've said it as well, wants those safeties to be interchangeable. Exactly. And Thieneman would give you that ability with Kobe Bryant and him back. If he's there, that's a guy that I would be perfectly fine with bypassing pass rush defensive line to grab that safety, because he is just such an athletic freak. I agree with what Jason says. I don't see them taking Brisker 2.0 in the first round, and that's really what EMW feels like to me.
The one thing with EMW, and the one thing, for me, he's a second rounder. I don't have a first round grade on him. I know Jeremiah is very high on him, and I respect DJ, one of the best in the business. But for me, and I think Eric at home as well agreed when we had him on the show, for me, EMW is more of a second round guy. He's a developmental prospect, right? Size 6'3", 201, 32 and a quarter inch, 1/8 inch arm length. You like the dimensions. It's got that lower body explosiveness with 35.5 inch vertical, all that stuff, and 10 foot something broad jump. But 4.5, 240 doesn't have the speed as the other 2 guys have, or at least as Thieneman has. But a 3-year starter at Toledo. But for me, he's got that skinny, thin frame, tad slow in terms of keying and diagnosing and triggering. That concerns me a little bit when watching his tape at Toledo. And has had a shoulder injury in 2024. Again, thin frame. If you're getting injured, in the MAC, with that thin kind of frame, taking on bigger bodies here in the next level, I have some concerns about him. So that's why for me, he's not a day one. If you draft him, he's not a day one starter. Could he start? Sure, but he's a guy that's going to come in. He's more of a developmental prospect guy that's going to get better over time. To compare him to Jaquan Brisker, I think it's not a fair comparison. I think this kid has more of a playmaking ability. Guys, Jaquan Brisker was I'm not first again. I was not a fan of the pick going back to how many years ago, but he was never. What impact did Jaquan Brisker ever make? Right, his best game was that last game against the Rams in the playoffs. So I think at least with Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, this kid has 9 forced fumbles in his career. So he can come down, he can punch that ball, get the ball out of there. His interception numbers are not eye-popping. They're only 5 interceptions, only 13 passes defense in his career. So again, ball production isn't the greatest, but getting that ball out, that's something that he could do. And it looks like he's got a little bit of a knack to it. But for me, he's more of a second round safety, kind of a developmental guy. You kind of bring in and nurture and eventually groom, get him a little bigger and get him into your starting lineup. But yeah, for me, if you're going to go first round safety, even though you have a bunch of holes up front, it's either Thieneman or Caleb Downs. At this point, I'm not sure if either one of those guys will be available for the Bears at pick 25.
Yeah, it's not sounding like it. I'm seeing a lot of mock drafts with Thieneman to Minnesota, and I kind of hope he's off the board before they get up there because I'd hate to have him in the division. He's an absolute menace on the backside, for sure. But, I mean, and there's a lot of depth, like Jason says. There's a lot of depth at the safety position.
There's a ton of depth in this year. You can get a guy in the fourth round that's going to come be a guy that can compete for a job. I mean, guy I like a lot is AJ Halsey from LSU. Doesn't fit, has a height and all that stuff, some of the other safeties, but the guy just can come in and be a thumper for you. There's this kid Payne out of Kansas State, big bodies, safety.
A lot like EMW. Payne is.
What's that?
Payne is a lot like EMW. So if you want
you can get him in a fourth round, right?
Right,
so
right.
You have to go and get him in that first round. So, there's this kid, Stoops from Arizona. One of those kind of converted nickel safeties where you can play some cover with them as well. Another one that does a good job of ball hawking and getting his hands on the football. So there's a ton of options here for safety. Now we had the safety discussion a couple of shows ago, but we'll go through this all over again. But yeah, it's safety is a position you can wait on, in my opinion. I do think though, not with pick 25, but I do think one of those picks, the first four, I think one of them will be a safety. So we'll see how the board runs. We'll see if there's a run on, for example, receivers in the first round, dropping some more defensive talent down to the Bears. Is there a run on offensive lineman in the first round, dropping some more talent down? So that I think that the Bears, those two runs happen, receiver and tackle, before the Bears. I think that's going to drop a ton of options out for the Bears, and that way they can have a cornucopia of options for them in terms of guys that can come in and fulfill up front. Front seven kind of players there as well. So it's exciting. It's a week from Thursday. Can't wait to see how everything shakes down and breaks down. But yeah, for me, if it's not Thieneman or Caleb Downs, I am not drafting a safety in the first round. Even if those two guys are available, for me, that's how. But if one of these premier guys that I want in terms of the front seven guys are available, I personally would bypass a safety and get one of those front seven guys.
Do you have your eyes on a certain somebody at 25?
Well, yeah, I got two guys that for me, as of right now, like I said, a week and a half away from the draft, that if they're there at pick 25, either one of these guys, for me, it's a no-brainer. You go for it. And one of them is Caden McDonald, the kid from Ohio State. I know that there's a lot of talk about him, in terms of, is he just a two-down player? Is he just a run stuffer? Well, I think currently he's just a two-down player, run stuffer, but I think he's shown potential to be a disruptor in the middle, right? Whether it's collapse in the pocket with just pure power and as a bull rusher. But I also see some twitch, whether it's a one technique or a zero technique. I think you line him up over a guard or maybe potentially in a center. I think he can also get up into that gap as well. So I think he gives you some options there at the end of the tackle. And I think, again, Bears had issues stopping the run last year, right?
Absolutely.
Remember the 49ers game? Remember that game up in Green Bay? The Bears couldn't stop the run. So you bring a guy like this that can come in and start right away, or at least participate in that rotation, back up, Dexter and Gray Jarrett, and eventually, become a starter, potentially next year. Because the one other knock you get here about McDonald is a one-year starter. Well, he was sitting, biding his time at Ohio State behind some other guys in front of him. So when he got his opportunity, this guy was first team Big Ten. So for me, if he's there, he's definitely an option. And Keldrick Falk, the kid out of Auburn, is a kid that I think he's a potential diamond in the rough, if you will. Now I know he's a first round pick, so that projection, first round pick projection. So for me, call him diamond in the rough. It might be a little bit reach there, but kid's only 20 years old.
Right.
20 years old, and he's getting knocked for last year, only having 2 sacks. Well, you go back to 2 years ago, he had 7 sacks. Playing in Auburn and playing in the SEC. Again, Auburn was a mess last year. The coach got fired, a bunch of stuff going on, but you put on his tape. And this kid's already a run stuffer. This guy's, first of all, let's go back real quick with Falk. He's got the dimensions in terms of what Dennis Allen wants. He's got the length, he's got the size. He's athletic in terms of his frame. He's got more room to add muscle there as well. and he's already a run stuffer. This guy's already plays the run very, very well for a 20-year-old, right? He won't be 21 till I think the season already started. I believe it might be October. So a 20-year-old is already playing the run, and that's the one thing you want to do with some of these young guys is these edge guys is you want to, they always want to go after the quarterback. This guy comes in as a guy that can help you with the run, right? And then you can coach him up in terms of what he can be in terms of as a pass rusher. So I think he's got the tools to be an eventual 7, 8, possibly 10 sack guy. Again, just 20 years old, good run stuff for day one, and a guy you can develop and make him into a better pass rusher. And again, fits that profile in terms of what Dennis Allen likes. So for me right now, if they stick at 25, if those two guys are available, one of those two guys is a selection, I'm good and I'm happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like the idea of trading back, though. Gabe Jacas is getting a lot of love in the chat here. Wilt Fong says he would take him at 25. I know Greg Gabriel's talked a lot about him, his motor and his get off, and he's got the size that really fits what Dennis Allen looks for as well. I believe Greg said he'd rather trade back and draft him, but
yeah, I think 25 is. I like Gabe Jacas as well. Kid out of Illinois, obviously, is a 4-year starter for the Illini, making 43 starts. Initially the talk about him was, he's about that tweener type, where he's a he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. Is he a hand in the ground defensive defensive end? But in terms of the profile, 6'4", 260, 33-inch arms, 10-inch hand size, so he fits some of that. The one thing that with Jacas and that I kind of go back and forth and struggle with is I always go back to last training camp, and when Dennis Allen was specifically talking about Austin Booker in terms of he doesn't have the size and the length necessarily and the bulk that he likes in his defensive ends, and that kind of caught my attention because I'm a big Austin Booker fan. And obviously, Booker then got off to that slow start, got injured, missed most of the season, then came on towards the end of the year where I felt like he was one of the Bears' better pass rushers. But this is not Dennis Allen's cup of tea in terms of defensive ends, right? He wants guys that are long, they got that frame, that the guy athletic about it can be physical at the point of attack. That's why Zion Young and kids like Falk are guys that we always keep mentioning with the Bears. And for Gabe Jacas, he's a guy that at 260, he's right there. How physical can he be at the point of attack? Does Dennis Allen see him as another Austin Booker? Because I just feel like could this be a duplicate, right? There's another guy that's getting a lot of love out there. It's Malachi Lawrence. And I think it's kind of similar vein in terms of guys that fall into that Austin Booker type of mold. And while DA utilized Austin Booker towards the end of the season, he's on record saying at training camp that he doesn't really fit what he looks for. But I think what DA was doing last year was just kind of seeing what he had and then utilizing guys as best to their ability. And I think he found a role towards the end of the year with Austin Booker. So I think now moving forward, Booker has a role on this football team. But I DA, knowing him, how he likes, he just wants those guys with length, with size, with physicality. Because he's right there. He's right there for me in terms of, I love his tape. I love his production. The guy produces in the Big Ten Conference. Again, 4-year starters, made 43 career starts, 2-time All Big Ten selection. Last year had 11 sacks. He's got 27 sacks for his career, 7 forced fumbles. This kid produces, right? So, yeah. But I think for 25 might be a little bit too high for him. So, if they trade down, and obviously, everyone wants the Bears to trade down, recoup some more, some picks. Heck, I'm a scout. I love as many picks as possible. But the only thing about trading down is there isn't typically, right, guys or teams want to come up in the half of the first round for a particular player. Generally, it's quarterbacks. This quarterback class really doesn't do much for a lot of these NFL teams, right? There was talk about Ty Simpson going in the first round. I thought that was a joke. I couldn't believe that someone had a first round grade on Ty Simpson. But anyway, those are more of the talking heads. And once you get into the scouts and all that stuff, they like, a lot of teams like Simpson. Yeah. But at 6'1", only 15 career starts, I believe it is. His arm isn't as strong as some of the other guys coming out. He's intriguing. He's a guy who, the one thing I like about him, his dad as a coach. So he's kind of trained to be a quarterback, pretty much throughout his life there. So you do there's some things that I like about Tyson, but is the team going to trade up to get him, right? So last year the Giants moved up with, I believe it was the Rams, if I'm not mistaken, or the Texans, I forgot which team, at 25 to get a Jackson Dart, right? So will a team like Ty Simpson that much, or pick another player that they see kind of tumbling down the board. I say, all right, that's where the Bears can strike there and maybe move back to the top half of the second round, maybe get a 4th round pick in the process as well. Just kind of add some more options there. So that would be ideal. I just don't see teams moving up to try and get into bottom half of the first round to make the Bears move back.
Yeah, you would think if they are coming up, it's to really just to get that 5th-year option, especially for a guy like Ty Simpson. If someone's going to come up, I don't think he's ready to start right away. So if you have a starter that is advanced in age, that you may be able to come up and let him sit behind him for a year and learn. Right. Maybe that's the route they go. So I would love to trade back in that 33, 34, like 36 area. I'm loving the way that looks. You're speaking my language when you talked about Malachi Lawrence. That is quickly becoming my draft crush this year. And I got to shout out to the chat for this one because I loved Zion Young, a lot of the things I saw from him. And I can't remember if it was here, if it was Barfly Tailgate, but somebody said, look at Malachi Lawrence. He gives a lot of the size that Zion Young gives with a little bit more bend and a little bit more speed off the edge. He's got a lot of the traits that I like to see as an edge rusher. Now, if he is closer to the size of Austin Booker, maybe it becomes redundant, or maybe he comes in on a pass rush down and you kind of do a NASCAR type package. But I love the way Malachi Lawrence looks, plays. He's got a high motor. He's got a plethora of pass rush moves. I'm not sure what his age is, but he has a lot of counter pass rush moves, which I love. But obviously, your D-line coach is not going to have to teach him a bunch of new moves to try and get off blocks. So that's one of my draft crushes. If he's there at 25, because I'm hearing, obviously it's lying season, so I could be hearing a lot of crap, but a lot of people are saying, if you're going to draft David Bailey so high, Malachi Lawrence gives you a lot of the same things, like a diet version of David Bailey.
I disagree big time with that comparison. David Bailey is a guy, we know what he is. We know David Bailey, first of all, he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's a pass rush assassin. He's a guy that's not going to be putting hand in the ground as a defensive end, lining up. So if a team drafts him, whether it's the Jets or the Cardinals, I'm not even sure what the Cardinals are running in terms of defense, but they got to, he's like a guy that's going to come off the edge, flying off the edge, and he's a pass rusher. That's all he is right now. But with Malachi, and I think first of all, I'm looking at my notes here. Malachi, I've circled so many times and I've highlighted, fun player to watch. I love watching his tape, and that's the guy. Again, you talk about some of his measurables: 6'4", 253, 33, 5'8", almost that 34-inch arm length. It's got ran a 4.5 flat 40, 1.57 10-yard split, 40-inch vertical. The kid's a freak in terms of athlete, but
right.
7 sacks last year for UCF, but good size and length, quick first step, violent player, violent pass rusher for a guy, with that type of frame, but he's really thin and narrow in terms of his hips, so he's got that skinny waist. He's a guy that is not going to be able to hold up as a defensive end in terms of, versus the run. So while he gives you some of that pass rush you're looking for, some of that first step, blazing ability off the edge. But this is a guy that when you watch his tape, they use him as an outside linebacker. There were some times where he had his hand in the ground, but a lot of times, guys, he was a stacked linebacker. He was standing up behind the defensive line. And this is something that no one's going to like here in the bar room. But he reminded me a lot of how Georgia used Leonard Floyd, right? And, as a stacked linebacker, a guy stood up and just kind of rushed from all different angles. And that's the thing you see with now Malachi is more physical in terms of in terms of Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd is a better overall athlete. Malachi is in terms of a better pass rusher, I believe. Also a little bit more physical and more violent in his game. But Mortar runs hot 24/7. He chases sideline to sideline. So you love the kid's tape. You love the kid's ability in terms of what he puts out there and potential. But again, going back to our conversation we had right now, in terms, I think he's very, very close to an Austin Booker. And will the Bears want to duplicate that? I don't know. You already have a guy similar in terms of Austin Booker, who's already been 2 years in the league, going on his third season. Why? That's the thing, is like, why duplicate an Austin Booker when you have someone already doing it at the next level? So for me, Malachi Lawrence is a guy that's going to be an outside 3-4 outside linebacker. Could he put on weight? Sure. He's 253 at the combine. Could he have to go 260, 265? I could see it. And again, he does have that pass rush, utilization in terms of that first step quickness. He's got the rip and the arm over and all that other stuff. But again, stood him up as a stack linebacker a lot of times at UCF. It's hard for me to envision him as a hand in the ground defensive end in a Dennis Allen system.
So you think these big offensive tackles in the NFL, when they get their hands on him, there's just not a whole lot he's going to be able to do? It's
not even the pass rush. I don't think he'll struggle as a pass rush. Like I said, he's got that first step quickness. He's got the ability to bend that corner and then flatten to the quarterback. It's more versus the run game. When he comes in, he's got a target on himself and says, all right, run at him. And I think he'll hold over in the run game early on. So, and that was a knock early on Austin Booker as well, right? Until finally, now they started rotating him a little bit more here and there. And it looks like Austin got a little bit better towards the run. Still not the greatest, I would say, but his cup of tea, Austin's is getting after the quarterback and providing pressure. Right. I think that's what Malachi would do as well. So I think to me, you're duplicating the play you already have. And I think what they want is if they're going to go edge, I think they want a guy that can potentially be a starter for them, years down the line. That's why I think maybe interior, we'll see how they go. But, again, nothing against the player. Love the player. Again, love his tape. Like I said, in my notes, it says fun player to watch.
Right.
I just think he's not going to be a guy that's going to fit what Dennis Allen wants. And if they do get him, if they do draft him, hey, my biggest question is I'm not going to be like, hey, this guy can't play. This guy definitely can't play. It's just that how are you going to utilize him? What's the plan for him in terms of how you're going to get him better, versus the run? What are you envisioning here for how you're going to utilize a kid like Malachi Lawrence and an Austin Booker? So that would be my question. Not that why you're drafting him or all that stuff. I do think 25 might be a little bit high for him. You probably see him a top half of that second round. Definitely day 2 for sure for Lawrence. But we'll see how everything plays out here. But fun player to watch. I just don't see him in terms of being a hand in the ground defensive end in a Dennis Allen scheme.
I just worry he's more in between the 25 and the 57 where we pick. So if we can trade down to grab him, I'd be more than happy with that and pick up another mid-round pick because we're missing 4th, 5th, and 6th round picks in this draft.
If we go for Malachi Lawrence, I'd rather drop down and get a Gabe Yakis, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, he gives you more physicality. He's about 260 pounds. And, the comparison to Zion Young, Zion Young is about 6'6", 262. Lawrence was 6'4", 253. So, you talk about 9-10 pounds of muscle there, or 9 to 10 pounds heavier there. You assume it's muscle. But, Zion Young is more of a stout player at the point of attack, more physical in terms of – he's not the pass rusher, in my opinion, that Lawrence is, right? He's still developing that game because Lawrence has that first step, quickness, got the bend, it's got the hand usage and all that stuff. And again, so it's just, 2 different kind of players. I think Young fits more of that profile because of the physicality, because of his ability to put his hand in the ground and be a guy who can deteriorate or, help set an edge and funnel everything back inside to his guys. So at this point, I don't think Lawrence can do that right now today. So that would be my first question. If you pick a guy like Malachi Lawrence, what are you going to do with him? What's your plan?
Right. Well, we do have some questions coming up in the chat already. Jason's asking, what about an older player like a Mesidor at 25? Would you be fine with us taking Mesidor? I know there's questions. His biggest question mark is his age, I guess. And
no, that's not his biggest question mark. It is going to be 25. His biggest question mark is injuries. He's got 2 injuries on a foot. I believe he had surgery, either a foot surgery and ankle surgery, or both on one thing. So those are the medicals are going to be something that they're going to take a look at here with him. There he goes. So the injury history is a big concern with him. Obviously, the age plays a part. But if you get a kid at 25, like a Mesidor, this kid's a dude. Now, he doesn't have the height. He's about 6'2". I believe I don't have my notes here in front of me technically about him, but I could pull him up here real quick. But he's 6'2". I want to say 260-some pounds. Here he goes. He's 6'3", 259. So right around 260. But he's a guy, again, dealt with injuries. He's a guy that actually, when you put on his Miami tape, you kick him inside a defensive tackle. That's where this kid just kind of eats up these interior guards. They can't handle him. And I think he had a hell of a year last year, 12.5 sacks from Miami. Again, 6th-tier senior. These guys that, kind of stick around for a little bit longer. Now, There's a bunch of stuff going on there. I think there's a COVID year in there involved, some not, and there's some injuries, blah blah blah. But at 25 years old, if you get him at 25, what you're doing is you're at the bottom half of that first round. You're trying to get guys that can get to a second contract, and does he fan out at towards the end of his first contract? Even if say you get 4 or 5 years out of him at 25, I think that's still a good draft pick. So this is my long about way of saying I think Mesler is a good player. I think there's some medical concerns with him. The age doesn't concern me, but again. He's his measurements. I didn't get his measurements here from his pro day, but I know 6'3", 259. I don't know what his arm length came in at, but definitely a guy that for me intrigues me a lot. Actually, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can pull this up here. I thought I had him. Do you have him there with you real quick?
I grabbed his
3 and something in terms of arm length. So he's
right
up there.
Measurements, it was pre-combine, so I didn't get his arm length, but he's 6'3", 265 is what they put on NFL.com. So I'm not completely sure what his arm length is. Maybe someone in the chat's got it. But I feel like I remember thinking that him and Bain, both of their arm lengths are shorter than actually a lot of guys in this draft are like that.
He's 32. He's 32 and 1/8 is what he came in at the combine. Obviously not ideal. So that's the thing. There goes, thanks, Jason. Yeah, 32 1/8 is what is arm length. So again, not ideal for what Dennis Allen likes at edge. But I'm telling you, there's some talk about maybe kicking Ruben Bain inside. We'll see. Yeah. But this is a kid. If you put on the tape in Miami, he really gets after those interior offensive linemen. I think, could you kick him inside at 260? It might be a little bit light, but he's intriguing. But I just, again, we're talking about DA who likes a certain type of player, a certain type of fit, and for me at least, his measurables don't quite hit that. But
right.
Tape. The kid has that first step quickness. He's got the bend there around the corner, can flat to the quarterback, plays a violent game. You love his tape. The injuries concern is huge, right? So that's going to be something that the Bears doctors are going to have to kind of clear him there. And then obviously DA is going to have to talk about in terms of the measurables, the length and all that stuff isn't what he wants. Is he comfortable going there? But yeah, I could see that guy being someone that come in and help them immediately in terms of generating some pass rush, whether inside or on the edge.
Couple more things before we move into talking corners. I saw some in the chat talking about Peter Woods from Clemson. I know we covered defensive tackles early, and I saw one of the mock drafts up. I think it was Charles Davis had us taking Peter Woods. Do you think is he a fit? I know Greg's had questions about his athleticism.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan in terms of first round. Now, if he drops, I think Peter Woods is not going to go in the first round. Came into the season as one of the top interior defensive tackles.
Right.
Coming off an 8.5 tackle for loss season with 3 sacks last year. Really had a for me, even like the whole Clemson team had just a down year. Even TJ Parker really kind of had a down year from what he had done the previous year. But I think Parker has kind of rebounded, some of what he did at the combine. I'm sorry, Senior Bowl, and then went to combine. I think Parker's kind of rebounded his stock a little bit. For me, Peter Woods is not a guy that I would want. At 25, that is, at least, if he drops in the second round and pick whatever they're picking at this 57 or 60, that'd be intriguing there. Because, he's a 3 technique. He's a true 3 technique, a guy that maybe, Grady Jarrett can kind of take under his wing and kind of groom him to be his heir apparent there. That would intrigue me, but not at 25. I just, there's his arm length is not there. It's sub 32-inch arm length. You see a lot of missed tackles there. A guy's kind of getting away from him. His effort level, for me, at least for me, was inconsistent. You see times where he can hit up the gap and make a penetrate and get after, adjust, make the offense adjust in terms of the running play or the running back's route and all that stuff in terms of his run path. And there are other times he just gets bowled over, and so that was something that really turned me off in terms of watching him. But yeah, for me, he's not a first round defensive tackle. There are other defensive tackles that I would rather wait on and get in the second or third round. One we talked about, with Eric was here, was McClellan, the kid from Missouri, Zion Young's teammate. So he's a guy that really intrigues me, possibly with that pick 60. Might even be there at pick 89. Who knows? But I'd rather take a flyer on those guys than Peter Woods at 25.
Well, Wilt Fong's asking about your guy Proctor from South Louisiana.
I love Proctor. Caleb Proctor is a quick twitch guy. Talk about a gap penetrator. Talk about a guy that can get after the quarterback. Again, size. He's about. I had him here. Let me get him real quick here. I think I want to go
I
through.
know he was your sleeper pick in this draft when we did defensive tackles. You love the way he fit, and
yeah. Caleb Proctor is a kid that I watched at the East West Shrine practices, and really just really got kind of mesmerized by his game. You put on his tape, you go, he's 6'2", 291, 33-inch arms. So he's a guy that's that three technique kind of guy inside, twitchy, real quick off the snap. Obviously, Southeastern Louisiana is a small school, so I think he's more of a developmental guy. But man, you put on that tape against LSU, and then we put a package up when we talked about him, and he was beating guys, LSU players, getting into the backfield and causing havoc. So 9 sacks last year for Southeast Louisiana, 13 tackles for loss. This is a guy that I really, really like, and if you get him in the 4th, maybe 5th round, I mean that's an absolute steal. Definitely a guy that I would rather take a chance on later on in the draft than a Peter Woods, for example, at pick 25. So, Zane Durant, another kid from Penn State. Production really hasn't been there, but you put on that tape. Undersized, no doubt about it. Again, it could be someone like a protege that a Grady Jarrett could kind of take under his wing and kind of groom him, for future years to come. But again, just someone that's quick twitch, get up that field. And, they talked about they want to add speed on defense. And I think, Proctor and guys like Zane Durant would add that speed. Won't give you that size necessarily, especially in Durant's case. But, man, they'll give you that speed. They'll give you that quick twitch ability. Easy for me to say. Quick twitch ability to get up into that gap and get into the backfield and cause some havoc there. But, yeah, perfect. See, so, because there was some talk about in terms of, Peter Woods in the first. I'm like, hey, I'll wait and get Zane Durant in the 3rd round because – right. Measurable wise, they're roughly the same. Arm length and all that stuff. In terms of even production, right? 14 tackles for loss, 14.5 tackles for loss for his career for Peter Woods, 22 tackles for loss for Zane Durant, 10 sacks as opposed to 5 sacks. So that's what I'm talking about. Like you can wait on if you're going to take a chance on an undersized, quick twitch 3 technique. Don't take Peter Woods in the 1st round. Go ahead and get like Zane Durant or even Caleb Proctor in the late day 2, early day 3 portion of the draft, and that's how I think you get more bang for your buck there, and then help fortify that front 7 with a little more physicality, because neither one of those guys are going to be physical present at the point of attack. They're guys more that are going to kind of help your pass rush and generate a pass rush from the inside, Durant and Proctor. So I think these are guys that need development in terms of that strength program and get stronger to be able to hold their ground. But their cup of tea is getting after the quarterback, attacking those gaps, and creating havoc in the middle of the defensive line. So that's what I would do. And I would pass totally on Peter Woods.
Yeah. Well, we've got, the chat's going nuts. We're talking left tackle. They're talking all kinds of prospects, but we got to get in.
Well, I'll tell you one thing right now. The Bears are not drafting a 1st-round left tackle. I can tell you that right now.
Well, there's been a lot of talk with the owners' meetings when they talk to.
Yeah, I think Ben Johnson created a little bit of a fervor here when he talked about left tackle. But if you just think about it, right? First of all, I think there'll be a run on tackles, and I think Caden Proctor, who's my personal first best left tackle, doesn't fit the profile in terms of I think that weight will scare some teams off. Plus, I've heard he's not getting past Detroit 17. We'll find out a week from Thursday, so he's not going to make it there. Freeling, Monroe Freeling, the kid from Georgia, is the ideal fit for this scheme in terms of athletic. He's got the length, he's got the size. Only has 18 career starts at left tackle, and he also has the same problem that Braxton Jones currently has. He's a guy that can get bullied. He's got a weak core in terms of his strength. He's going to have to build that up and get stronger. So again, he's a guy that shows tremendous promise. And I think athletically he can play left tackle, but he's going to have some problems early on in his career. Again, only 18 starts in college. To me, that's a bit of an option there where I think. It's a bit of a risk there. Now he might even not be there available at 25 either. So the other kid is Lomu from Utah. Sub 34-inch arms, but 33-inch arms, longer than his teammate. He's more of a left tackle prospect. I know he was in for a 30 visit. He'd be intriguing. But this is why I think this is why I'm saying they're not going to draft a left tackle in the 1st round. Because if you draft a tackle in the 1st round, what does that tell you about Ozzie Trapillo? right? You invested a second round pick on Ozzie Trapillo. He was your starting left tackle for towards the second half of the season on. It tells you if the Bears do draft a left tackle in the first round, that tells me that the Ozzie Trapillo injury is worse than we are been led on to, and that they probably don't see him coming back and being effective, right? Because that's the only reason why you would take a left tackle. So if they do take a left tackle and I'm wrong in the first round, that tells me that Ozzie Trapillo pretty much is done here. Unfortunately, that injury is way worse than what we've been hearing about. So that's why I'm holding out hope that Ozzie is going to be okay. We know next year they got Braxton Jones, they brought in Jedrick Wills, they have Theo Bennett. And guys, no one talks about Cornerback. The guy is still on the roster. And when we talk about the left tackle, no one talks about him. This guy's a third-round pick, right? So you got 4 guys that can come in there and at least compete for that job and then provide some depth there as well. So I think, my opinion, they're going to ride the wave or the next year with one of those veterans, whether it's Jedrick Wills or Braxton Jones, with the possibility of Theo or Cornerback, kind of competing there for that spot as well. And the one thing we did find out last year was Ben Johnson can game plan around a weakness at left tackle, right? It wasn't by accident that Ben Johnson last year, first day of free agency, went and secured the interior of the offensive line. That to him is more important, right? So I think he can game plan around the left tackle. Interior guys he needs, and it's harder to game plan around him. So I think if they do draft left tackle, that means Ozzie's career is probably pretty bad, and we'll see how that goes. But that's why, so for me, I just don't think they're taking a left tackle in the first round because I'm hoping and hope that Ozzie comes back in a year from now and can reclaim his starting spot on that left side.
Yeah, and I love that. I love Ozzie too. When they draft, I didn't know him pre-draft, but once they drafted him, I looked at him. The guy looked like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, and I was like, "That's my left tackle." I was loving what I saw out of him. Unfortunately, the knee went out. Hopefully, he can come back fully healthy. But we gotta dive into these corners, Danny. So I'll just throw your top 5 up here. Danny's top 5 corners this year's draft. Number 1 is Mansour Delane from LSU. Number 2 is Jermod McCoy from Tennessee. Number 3, Chris Johnson from San Diego State. Number 4 is Colton Hood from Tennessee. And number 5 just had a 30 visit, I think today I saw on the X's, Keontae Scott out of Miami. Give me the rundown, Danny.
First of all, this is a deep class here at cornerback. And one position that kind of gets overlooked when we talk about the Bears in terms of their draft needs is corner. And I understand they have Jalen Johnson coming back, and they have
Zay Frazier,
Stevenson, on the opposite side. They have Ajar Reed from I forgot his last name. Is it Reed? I forgot the kid. Ajar Frazier. Sorry, Ajar Frazier from last year is a 5th round pick that basically was AWOL. We didn't see him all year. Terrell Smith coming back from a torn. Actually, I think if he had an ACL or
I can't remember. I know it was a year-long injury.
So there are issues. Obviously, you lost Nashawn Wright. So corner is a position that I feel like they have a need in a big need. Now, my top 2 corners, my guys in terms of my top 4 right here are all for me have first. Colton Hood's on the border, but the first 3 guys have first-round grades for me. Hood's just made it there, but I could see him going end of the first round, top of the second round. Now, he did get invited to the draft, which is that kind of tells me that's a pretty good indicator, not a guarantee. Pretty good indicator he's probably going to go in the first round as well.
I watched my guy Will Levis sit there all night on night 1 when he got invited to the draft.
There's a bunch of players that get invited and then don't go anywhere. But if you dive into this corner group now, the top 2 guys, if we talk about safety, would I take a safety at 25? I said, we can't really, kind of invest in that. Now, if one of these top 2 corners are available at 25, I think long and hard about it, right? And you say, wait, Danny, isn't that kind of being contradictory? What, you don't draft a safety, but you draft? Yeah, because a corner is key in the Dennis Allen scheme. A press corner, a guy can get up there. And how many times he talked about last year in terms of Dennis Allen talked about he wants his corners to be physical. He wants his corners to get into the body of the receiver, to disrupt that release, especially in press coverage, to be able to kind of reroute them if they can, throw off the timing of the offense. So I think he utilizes that. And a great example of how Dennis Allen utilizes his corners to help generate pressure was the playoff games, right? When he had the full complement, where he had guys like, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson, being getting a little bit more healthier towards the end of the season, we saw that defense kind of get more pressure up front because the cornerbacks were doing their jobs. They're either getting their hands on the receiver or they're blanketing them down the football field, and those front four or front five guys were getting after the quarterback. So I think that's why a corner is a huge need for the Bears, something that not a lot of us talk about. And if you look at my list, Mansour Delane became my top corner kind of by default. The reason why, first of all, 6 feet, 187, ran a 4.38 40 at the LSU Combine with a 1.50 10-yard split. Love that speed. And he plays that fast, right? This is he played safety and cornerback in high school, also was a wrestler. Started his career at Virginia Tech, where he was a 3-year starter, made 29 starts there at Virginia Tech, transferred to LSU in 2025 and started 11 games last year. So he's got 40 career collegiate starts. He's got the experience there, right? 2025 consensus All-American was a unanimous selection there. Only 26% of the completions gone his way were completed. 26% of the balls thrown his way were completed. So this is a guy, 8 career interceptions, all right, 27 pass defense. So he's got his hands on the ball. He's a ball hawk, right? 4 forced fumbles. So this is a guy that can line up and press coverage, can mirror at the line of scrimmage, can get his hands on a receiver. Now, he doesn't have the length that I believe DA wants in those corners, only 30-inch arms, but still can get up there and can press at the line of scrimmage, can also, as you see here, drop back and play some off-man coverage there as well. Quick feet, he's got that loose hips, the open, can swing open the gate and run here, track down, stay in phase with the receiver. Here, he kind of, the receiver kind of has got about a 10-yard, almost a 10-yard cushion there, and he catches up with that speed. Ball was on the throw a little bit, but, that shows you some of that playmaking ability to be able to kind of recover with that speed and get back in phase. So I think this is a guy that has, CB1, CB2 written all over him.
Yeah.
And I think he'd be a nice complement opposite of someone like Jalen Johnson. Hopefully Jalen Johnson comes back to being the Jalen Johnson that we've seen in the past years. But he kind of made my top corner by default only because Jermod McCoy didn't play last year. You put on Jermod McCoy's tape, he's a CP1 all day.
Yeah.
I love this kid. And the reason why he's number 2, he didn't play last year. He didn't play last year at all. But you put on a 2024 tape, this kid is a stud. You talk about, we're talking about press coverage, talking about off-man coverage, talking about in terms of, transition, coming downhill. There you see you taking a big hit there. Here, covering Alabama receiver, mirroring him at the line of scrimmage, and then making a ball, jumping and making a play for the ball. Only has played 2 seasons, all right, for Tennessee. 6 interceptions, 16 pass defense. But again, tore his ACL in January of last year. He was training for the season, tore his ACL, didn't play at all last year. Came back at the Tennessee Pro Day and ran a 4.38 40, 1.52 10-yard split, had a 38-inch vertical, a 10-foot 7-inch broad jump. This kid, that to me proves that he's back to being healthy. Now, obviously, the medicals done at the combine and the teams have all this information. Assuming those are all clear, I think this is your first corner selected come Thursday night. And so that's why I'm saying I don't think he's there for the Bears. But if some run happens where it's unexpected and he drops, this is a guy that I would put into heavy consideration being that pick at 25, because again, a kid that's got has got the ability to play press man, can get his hands on the receiver, can reroute, throw off the timing of an offense. That's what Dennis Allen wants in his cornerbacks. And again, Jalen Johnson coming off an injury-plagued season last year. Hopefully he comes back to full health and he's the Jalen Johnson we anticipated. But again, that's a big number on the books. If you can you can potentially replace Jalen Johnson down the road in a year or two with a kid like a McCoy or a Delaney Mansour, that frees up a lot of other cap space for other positions. You got a quarterback pretty soon, probably going to be in line for a hefty extension. So some of these big numbers have to come off the book. So just keeping that in mind. But assuming that neither McCoy or Mansour are available, the next guy is Chris Johnson from San Diego State. And this is a kid, for me, he caught my eye at the Senior Bowl. And
I'm loving this kid too. I got to be honest, Danny. This is a guy that digging into the tape here that you sent me, and the more I see him, I saw him at the combine tearing up he tore up the combine. I'd have to think about him at 25 as well. I know it's not our biggest need, but I'll just throw the tape on and let you talk, man.
Yeah, 6 feet, 193. So he's not as big as some of the other, other two in terms of height. McCoy's 6'1", 192. So that's the same weight, but he's a little bit bigger than Delane. But his biggest thing was how fast is he, right? He's pretty fast on tape, but he goes to the combine and runs a 4.40 flat 40, 1.54 10-yard split, 38-inch vertical. So again, I bring those numbers up because that doesn't also doesn't just show their speed, but also shows that the lower body explosiveness that they have in their legs. So that's key for a defensive back or a defender, especially when you're going up against bigger body receivers, possibly tight ends. But to your starter, San Diego State, the Mountain West Conference Defensive Player of the Year in 2025, led the conference in forced fumbles with 3. He's got 5 forced fumbles for his career. Okay, 6 interceptions, 14 passes defense. 2 of his 4 interceptions in 2025 were returned back for a touchdown. So he's got that kind of playmaking ability. Not only is he going to pick the ball off, he's going to try and take it back and score for a touchdown. So I think that's going to be something that potentially Dennis Allen and the Bears coaches would love to see on film. So solid size we talked about here, quick to plan transition to close in on wide receivers. All ball carriers, can mirror and open his hips and stay with the receiver in phase down the field, has coverage awareness and is able to locate and find the ball in the air. Plays the run aggressively, has the ability to create turnovers. Again, 6 interceptions and 5 forced fumbles. Those are some of the notes I have here for Chris Johnson. So again, caught my eye at the Senior Bowl. Watch some of his preliminary, tape there, some work on him. Speed was my, a little bit of a concern, not a huge concern. I just had a question in terms of, is he a 4.4 guy? Is he a 4.5 guy? Then runs a 4.4, a blazing flat 40 there at the combine. I think he has solidified himself in the lower half of that first round. Is he an option at Bears at 25? Obviously he's number 3 on my list. I have him 3rd behind the other 2 guys, but assuming the other 2 guys are gone, this is where, remember we talked about earlier, what are you looking at? You're looking at your 3rd best corner potentially on your board, or you're looking at the 2nd best defensive tackle or 2nd best edge guy. This is how we got to see how that first round plays out and how everything shapes up here. But yeah, this kid really, really, I like him a lot. And as I could tell, and like I said, he even comes off the edge, blitzes. He's an aggressive blitzer too. The more you watch by Chris Johnson, the more you like him. I think he's worked his way up from a late day 2 guy to a now guy that you could potentially see go late in the round 1 and day 1. So really, really high on Chris Johnson.
For sure. And we got another Tennessee guy. Tell me about Colton Hood, man.
Yeah, Colton Hood is the guy that actually played this year as opposed to McCoy. He's the guy opposite of the Tennessee Volunteer, obviously. He's the guy who started the only question about him, and this may not even be a question anymore. Back in days when you used to pull up a guy's profile, you said, this kid's played at 3 different schools and 3 different seasons, right? Back then, that would be a red flag. Nowadays, in days of NIL, I'm not sure that that's a red flag anymore. That's the only thing that, he played at Arbor in 2023, went to Colorado in 2024, and this past year he was with Tennessee. So, again, this is a guy that's sturdy and strong, with good lower body explosiveness, ran a 4.44 40 at the combine, had a 1.58 10-yard split, a 40.5-inch vertical. Again, another one that gets his hand on the ball, 14 pass defense the last 2 seasons, only 3 interceptions. So the interception numbers aren't where you want them there, but he could probably improve there. But talk about a guy again can mirror at the snap, vertically on crossers. It's got that makeup speed where if he gets beaten at the line of scrimmage off of a great release, he's not dead in the water. He can always make up and get back in phase because of that. His foot quickens and his speed. You like that about him as well. Can get physical in press coverage and reroute or slow down the progress of a receiver. I think we just saw that in a previous clip where he kind of just got into the chest plate of the Alabama receiver was, and here you see him kind of coming downhill and being an aggressive run defender as well. You love seeing that too from your corners. Obviously, that's very important at this next level. So I love the ability, the awareness he shows in zone when he's back there. Again, this is that clip we're talking about here, getting into the receiver's chest, slowing him down, slowing off that release, throwing off the timing of the offense. And if he gets beaten He's got that recovery speed to get back up there and get back in phase. So for me, that's why Colton Hood now is number 4 going into the draft here. And I love that clip right there. Fights out that would-be blocker and gets in there and gets his nose dirty and goes ahead and makes a tackle there. And again, affecting that run support. So for me, he's a kid that I don't know if I'm as high on him as I am on McCoy or Johnson or Mansour in terms of the first at pick 25. I definitely like him a lot. But if he is at pick 25, I would understand why he was that pick, for the Bears. So I wouldn't poo-poo it or be upset about it. I'm just saying I like those other guys a little bit better. I think those are, like I said, Hood for me was a borderline first round guy. It just barely made it. So I think that's why he's probably you're going to see him probably go in that bottom half of that first round. But initially I had a third round grade on him. The more I watched, the more I studied him, the more his grade kept getting better and better. And eventually he was second round material. And then eventually I snuck him into that bottom half of the first round. So that's why he makes number 4 here on my list of top corners.
The final guy in your top 5, Keontae Scott. Like you said, he had a 30 visit today with the Chicago Bears. So tell me about him, Danny.
I absolutely love this kid. All right. I don't know how much I can stress how much I love this kid.
First, before you get too deep in, do you see him as more a corner or a safety? Because I feel like that's become a debate.
It's funny you mentioned that, AC. It's funny you mentioned that because he initially was going to make my top 5 safety list. And then I was talking to a guy I know who's in the league, and he goes, the teams are looking at him as a corner, as a nickel corner. So he goes, I would kind of list him as a corner. However, kind of going back and watching his tape, the more I watch, the more I'm going back to my convictions that this kid has safety ability, right? First of all, measurables are 5'11", 193, 31 and 3/8 inch arm length. This is a kid that, again, the more I watch, the more I love. And when I watch him, he's comfortable, first of all, covering out of the slot as a nickel corner. He's not the greatest in terms of coverage, right? So he's not going to be a guy that's going to be on the outside, in my opinion, right? To be a true, outside corner. But watch him at the line of scrimmage. His aggressiveness at or near the line of scrimmage, it's like an extra linebacker. So the person I thought, or the player I thought, is this is the younger, faster replacement for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. This is the guy that can come in, and this guy has got the speed, ran a 4.37 40 at the combine with a 1.5. I'm sorry, at the Miami Pro Day with a 1.53 10-yard split, had a 34-inch vertical and a 10-foot 3-inch broad jump. Again, I initially saw him as a safety. I was told consider him the NFL is considering him as a corner. So for me now, he's a nickel hybrid, nickel/safety, similar to the vein of what C.J. Gardner-Johnson was. And we saw last year that a C.J. Gardner-Johnson, again, been in the league for how many years? His speed isn't what it used to be. But Dennis Allen found a way to utilize him and make him effective. And then when Kyler Gordon came back, the combination of Gordon and then C.J. Gardner-Johnson and then Jalen Johnson and some of the other corners, that's where we saw that defense kind of come alive. And I think this is that perfect replacement here for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Again, ran a 4.37 40, so he's athletic as hell, right? This is a guy that was a two-way starter in high school, coming out of California. Started his career actually at a Snow Community College, a small school there. Went to Auburn, where he was a starting nickel there for them from 2022 to 2024, making 23 career starts. Transferred to Miami this last year. Had 13 starts after initially committed to Houston, then went to Miami. Made second team All ACC. He has punt return and kickoff return experience as well. This is a guy for me, again, quick diagnose. That's what the thing you watch him post and pre-snap, whether he's in the box as an extra defender, linebacker, safety, whatever you want to call him, or where he's going back in coverage. His ability to key and diagnose almost instantly when the ball is snapped. He knows what's happening. So that's an intelligent player. Someone in the secondary, you can see here, he's got that makeup speed. So even if a receiver's got a little bit of a step on him, his ability to go ahead and catch up and get his hands on the football, jumps everything in front of him in terms of zone. You can plant and drive and doesn't back down. 5'11", 193, but he plays like a linebacker. But again, it's got the feet of a corner. He's got the loose hips of another, again, like a cornerback. So twitchy body. Again, can just plant and fire downhill. Very good burst, long speed. This is a guy that can, and in terms of some of the things we missed in this clips here, was him as a blitzer off the edge. Again, I kept going back and seeing what Dennis Allen did last year with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I'm like, this would be an ideal replacement, a younger, more athletic, a faster, if you will, a body that can go in there and kind of contribute right away. So for me, when I saw that they had him in the 30 visit, I was like, I wasn't surprised, but I was just like, man, I think that really is something that is exciting because, he is a guy that can come in here, in my opinion, and start, next year as a potential as a nickel. The only question I have there is what do you do with Kyler Gordon, right? So going back to Kyler Gordon, when he came out of Washington, I had him as an outside corner, right? And obviously the Bears brought him in and made him a nickel, and he's been a pretty good nickel when he's been available. So I think with a kid like Keontae Scott, you bring him in, you make him the nickel, and now if you need to, you can kick Kyler Gordon out to cornerback on the outside. If I'm not mistaken, I should say, we saw some Kyler Gordon in the playoffs playing outside corner, covering some of those receivers. So I think that's something an idea that kind of really appeals to me, at least. Hopefully appeals to the Bears and the coaching staff. But this kid at nickel corner, with a hybrid kind of player, with a Kyler Gordon on the outside, possibly an inside kind of, again, for me, I envision Scott taking over that C.J. Gardner-Johnson role. I think that would be very, very enticing, very, very, very good to see how that would kind of develop. So he's definitely a day 2 guy. I think he goes second, third round, possibly more like a second round. So with a pick 57 or pick 60, I think he's a guy. If he's there, if the Bears take him, I would be ecstatic, to be honest with you, because I think this is an impact player come next season. Again, at nickel corner, and a guy that can also drop it. Remember, their current safety, they went and just signed from the Seattle Seahawks. Kobe Bryant was a cornerback coming out of Cincinnati, and they converted him to safety. So, you could have kind of similar, we talked about earlier, interchangeable safeties back there, right? If he eventually ever moves him to a full-time safety, potentially that's what a Keontae Scott can give you there back there as well. Another interchangeable kind of a mirror image of Kobe Bryant. So, but again, I like him as a nickel / safety, more of that Gardner-Johnson thing, and we'll see how it goes. But if they get him, that's going to be an exciting pick for me.
Yeah. Well, the chat's not a huge fan of him switching to safety. A lot of them are saying
not full-time safety. He's going to be a nickel corner with some of that safety skills, right? And when you watch him at arena line of scrimmage, he plays like an extra defender. Like he plays like a linebacker, right? Even though he doesn't have the linebacker frame or size, he's a guy that can, come downhill and be a guy that could throw his body around and get in terms of the run defense. You see him flying off the edge as a blitzer. You line him up as a nickel and blitz him off that edge. He's got 4.37 speed, guys. This guy's going to make impact. And he plays that swagger game, right? Similar again to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, where he talks, he gets in the guys' faces, he gets in their heads. I just love what he brings to the football field. And again, he's not going to be an outside corner, right? He's not going to line up outside of the numbers, in my opinion. I don't think he can. I think he's more of a nickel corner with some safety skills in terms of being able to play in the box.
Yeah. I don't know if I love him at nickel, but more than you study the tape more than I do. I'm just going off what I saw, but I did love to see him. Jeremiah Love is going to be a top 5 draft pick, and there was clips on that tape there of him getting in the backfield and shutting him down.
He can cover backs out of the backfield and cover tight ends. The only thing is, again, 5'11", 197, 193, doesn't have the biggest frame. So, big body tight ends could, kind of, you could see him if he's in coverage, could see him, kind of box him out. But again, you don't really see much of that on his Miami tape. But, that's something that you can kind of, keep an eye on at the next level. But yeah, for me, he's an inside player. A guy that can do a lot of damage with in terms of utilizing that playmaking ability. And so for me, 6 sacks, guys, he had 13 tackles for loss last year at Miami. Well, what nickel corner / safety has 13 tackles for loss, and that's what he had last year at Miami. So it tells you the way he kind of comes downhill with aggressiveness and gets into that backfield, makes plays. Again, 2 forced fumbles. But again, he's a guy that you can use him multiple different facets of the way. You can have him coverage, you can have him come as a blitzer, you can have him support the run. Gives Dennis Allen, I should say, that kind of Swiss Army knife where he could put him in a different location, disguise coverages with him. right? You can do that as well. I just think that Dennis Allen would have a field day. You could put a kid like Keontae Scott in that defensive backfield.
Yeah, I got a couple more guys here that have been I've seen kind of floated. I think last week we had someone that was loving Brandon Cisse out of South Carolina, so I grabbed his measurables. I didn't see his 40 time, so I don't know if he ran one at his pro day or what the thing
Yeah, as
was.
pro day, I got his notes right here. Pro day ran a 4.4640 with a 1.53 10-yard split, 6 feet, 189 pounds. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Those are his let's see. Hold on. This is pro day. Yeah, 4.46. Yep. And it had 15 reps on the bench. I'm sorry. Don't mean to confuse you guys there. Yeah, Cisse is a guy I've heard a lot about as well. Another one, played DB and wide receiver in high school. Also played basketball and ran track. So he's a sport athlete. Started his collegiate career at NC State, transferred to South Carolina in 2025 and started all 12 games there. So he's just a one-year starter. He wasn't really a starter at NC State. So again, you put on his tape, you see a guy that's looks like a one-year starter. The ball production is not really there. 1 interception, 5 passes defense. He's a guy for me. The size you like at 6 feet 189. He's a guy that could be a guy that could disrupt the floor of a receiver. In terms of at the line of scrimmage, but didn't really see much of that physicality on his tape. Yeah. In terms of his ability to kind of swing his hips and open it. And remember, there's a couple of times where he got turned around in coverage and the receiver beat him badly. I think it was Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M, really. So that's a speed receiver, kind of really took him to task there. So for me, he's a one-year starter. He's a bigger body corner. The weight's at 189, 190. So speed's okay. I just think he's more of a developmental guy, a guy that as opposed to coming in here and starting next year or at least contending next year, could be a depth guy initially with the potential to be developed into a starter. So for me, I want immediate production from my guys, especially with these first 4 picks. Right, you got 4 picks in the top 89. Not just saying flat out Cisse would come in here and not be able to contribute, but I just those one-year starters, guys that I see some technical flaws on tape. It's a lot to expect them to come in here and be an emergency starter if needed, or compete for a starting position versus Tyreek Stevenson. So that's why for me he's a little bit lower on my rankings. But yeah, definitely a guy that intrigues me. You like that size speed combination, but more of a guy that can develop. Maybe a second year he could kind of compete for a starting job, but not someone that can come in here and be a day one contributor. In my opinion, we'll see how it turns out. Again, ball production really does bother me. Only 1 interception last year. Yeah. But again, only 1 year as a starter, right? So I didn't watch all of his games, but I watched about 3 or 4 games, and the opportunities were there. DH didn't come down the ball. The receiver didn't catch the ball a lot of times, but it's just the opportunity to make plays in the football weren't there for me. So developmental kid definitely intrigues me. Again, that size and speed combination, really, I do like that a lot. Played in the SEC, which is always a plus there as well. So, but just really couldn't get much going at NC State, and then ended up going to South Carolina. And then, like I said, had that 1 year as a starter. So more of a developmental guy for me, as opposed to some of the other guys on my list here, where I think any one of those 5 guys could come in and contribute in year one. Cisse is a kid that I think could need some time.
I got a couple more guys.
By no means.
Okay. I got a couple more guys here that kind of fit the size that they look for. The number one that I've got in here is a senior corner, Ephesians Prysock. I saw a meme that said he sounded like he was in the Key and Peele skit. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where they do the players' names, and it's just a bunch of made up goofy stuff because it just sounds weird. 6'3", 198. I got both the guys from Washington on here. You got anything on Ephesians?
Yeah, Ephesians is a guy that intrigues me as well. I actually, personally, I like Takero Davis, his teammate, a little bit more. But we can get to him after it. But yeah, Ephesians Prysock was at the Senior Bowl. You mentioned the size there: 6'3", 196, 33 1/8 inch arm. Like, Dennis Allen's going to love that size. He's going to love that length as well, right? So played at Arizona for the first couple seasons of his career. Started 16 games there for the Wildcats, and then plays the last 2 seasons there at Washington, starting 26. So he's a 3-year starter in all. He's got 42 career starts, excellent size and length. good short area burst to be able to close. He's got those long legs, so he can really, long strides, make up ground quickly there. Physical at the line of scrimmage and press, and also at the top of the route. So this guy can get handsy, can help reroute, and can, kind of throw the flow off in terms of the offense. So I think this is a guy that I can see Dennis Allen really liking, right? Really taking to, because again, that physicality and ability there. Some of the negatives that I kind of caught on tape, lower body stiffness, quick change of direction can be an issue for him. He's more of a straight line athlete as opposed to a guy that can go, quickly, laterally or stop and start. Transition out of his back pedal, especially downhill, can be a little bit clunky, meaning, when you're in zone, you kind of drop back to a landmark, and then when you see someone coming in your area getting the ball, you plant, transition downhill. It wasn't as quick and as seamless as some of the other guys that I watched on tape. He's got 6 coverage penalties last year at Washington. 6 pass interference, 2 holding, so he can get a little handsy in coverage. That's something that's going to be cleaned up, but I think those are just coaching stuff that he could work on there. And had some drop would be interceptions. Right? Only has 2 career interceptions. Again, 4-year player, 42 career starts, two career interceptions. Saw some drops on his tape. That tells me hands might not be the greatest there. Did have 20 passes defense, so he can get his hands on the ball, but kind of plucking it out of the air and making the interception. That's why for me, he's a notch lower than his teammate Takeru Davis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, go right into Takeru. That's the next guy I got on here.
This is a guys. I watched this. Earlier I made the Keontae Scott reference to C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I watched Takeru Davis, and the more I watched him, he reminded me more of Nahshon Wright from last year. It's a kind of like a Nahshon Wright clone, in my opinion. 6'4", 194. Again, 33 and 3/8 inch arm length. So he's got that size. He's got the length to be able to disrupt at the line of scrimmage. Also, he started his collegiate career at Arizona. So both these guys were at Arizona with Jet Fish. Jet Fish ended up getting the Washington job. They ended up transferring there to Washington. He transferred, though, but Davis transferred to Washington last year. So last year was his first year there. Started only 7 games, missing the other with an injury. Had hamstring and rib injury. So he had he was banged up a little bit there. But yeah, I love, first of all, 4'4", 140, 40-yard, at the 40-yard dash, 1.59 10-yard split, 37-inch vertical, a 10-foot 3-inch broad jump. So it tells you some of that lower body power he's got there. Solid in terms of transitioning downhill. We talked about his teammate kind of being a little clunky there in terms of transition. This kid's a little more smoother, a little more quicker in terms of coming downhill. He's got that long reach to press and jam and be able to stall receivers at the line of scrimmage. Again, it's got solid press corner ability. Again, uses that length to stay within the frame of the receiver. Equally comfortable, playing press or zone. So yeah, you can be a little bit diverse with him. Was as opposed to Price, like he could probably play both as well, but I like them really a lot as press cover. This kid can back off a little bit. Again, maybe more because that transition is a little bit quicker, more seamless, comes downhill quicker. I think he could play either coverage, in terms of what they use there. Love the way it uses that length, the 33, almost 34-inch arm length. Does a good job of wrapping up and tackling. He's got that kind of those anaconda arms. He kind of brings the running back down there. Again, love the long strides, right? He's got those loose hips, long strides. If he is being at the line of scrimmage, he's got that speed and those long strides to be able to make up ground quickly, get back in phase, and make a play on the football. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this kid. Again, the more I watched, the more I thought of Nahshon Wright, but a younger version, obviously, of Nahshon Wright. So I think this is a guy. If you can get this kid in the 4th round, I think that's a hell of a pickup there. I think could be potentially a guy that could be a diamond in the rough there, especially if you get him in that 3rd round. I've heard these Washington kids are getting more and more attention. So we'll see what happens there. But I like both these kids. I like Davis a little bit better though.
Do you think it's the size that's kind of making them get more
size and speed and their ability to disrupt at the line of scrimmage? So I think those are, and then the ability, if they get beaten, make up ground quickly. So I think obviously, Davis 4'4", 140. I think Price like around a 4'5", if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 4'5". So right there in that same range. But for me, Davis is a little bit more smoother in terms of as an athlete overall. But Yeah, no, in terms of interception, him too. Numbers weren't great. 3 interceptions, 25 past the fence.
Mhm.
But again, getting the hands on the ball. So we'll see how it goes. But these are 2 guys that really intrigue me. Both guys, when I watched them, I said, all right, Dennis Allen will probably love these guys. We'll see what Al Harris thinks about them.
Yeah.
But if you can get one of these guys either in the 3rd or 4th round, I think that's a pretty good selection. We'll see how they pan out. But with Al Harris, man, I love him as a coach there in that DB room.
Absolutely.
I mean, you give him a kid with talent like a Davis with that length and that speed, or even a price tag, I think he can make them into a very good football player. In a really quick time frame there as well.
Yeah, I was shocked when I looked up Takario on the college football reference. He went to college originally as a defensive end with that size, so that was pretty crazy to see that. He didn't. I think he redshirted that year or something. He played like 5 games, so he didn't have crazy stats. But I was just, at least I don't see a lot where they transition from defensive end to defensive back. And I see them more as, I was looking more of a day 3 because. And we've talked about it on here, and the chat's even talking about it. It's not it may not be a huge need. It could be a day 3 guy that they grab. So that's why I was looking more at the guys that kind of.
You guys think corner is not a huge need?
Well, some guys they're asking, do we think we should have kept Nashawn Wright? They're saying with
the NFL told you when they thought of Nashawn Wright. He had 5 interceptions, made the Pro Bowl, and he only thing he got out there was a 1-year, $5 million contract. Yeah. I think the NFL told you what they thought of Nashawn Wright, guys. So I think
they're not saying that it's not a need. They're just saying it's behind to them, and obviously, honestly, to me as well, behind D-line, center, safety, probably.
For me, there's no way the corner is. For me personally, there's no way corner is behind safety. I don't think it's because. Corner is, again, Dennis Allen's scheme. You need corners that can disrupt and play at the line of scrimmage and get into the receiver. So, Tyreek Stevenson, I think this is a make or break year for him. Obviously, I don't think I'm breaking any news there. So I think he's a guy that's got to either show out or he's going to be out. And
that's true.
He's a guy that he's flashed talent. He's flashed the ability to be a playmaker in coverage. In terms of making some incredible interceptions. And I remember his rookie campaign. He had a real nice interception there in Cleveland. But the inconsistencies we see with him, right? And hopefully he's turned the corner. Hopefully he comes in and he lives up to that second round potential that he was drafted at. And you have your corners. But again, Jalen Johnson, that was a huge injury last year. Hats off to him for coming back and playing through it and getting back and actually being on the field. But we saw how he was. He wasn't 100%. Now,
right.
Got a little bit more healthier towards the tail end of the season. We saw a little bit better, but there's no guarantee that he's going to be back to the Jalen Johnson that we've seen in the previous seasons, right? The Pro Bowl caliber Jalen Johnson. So until I see that, it's always a little like, we'll see what happens there. But obviously, Kyler Gordon, when he's healthy, when he's playing, he's effective. But he's another guy that I believe has only played 1 full season of football so far in his short career. So for me, there's a lot of question marks. And again, if your corners cannot disrupt and be sticky in coverage, I think you have issues as well, especially if you have a defensive front that has had trouble getting after the quarterback. So I'm not saying that a good pass rush, if the Bears had a great pass rush, like the Texans, for example, you can get by with subpar corners, if you will. I'm not saying put bums out there, but I'm saying you don't have to be at the top-notch athletic guys or length and all that stuff, but it's just the Bears need guys that can stay in phase downfield, can make up ground quickly and more importantly can get physical at the line of scrimmage and kind of again throw off the timing of that offense. And I think that's what Dennis Allen leads. I think for me that is as a big need, over center because you have Garrett Bradbury right now as your starter going into next season. So we don't know. Starter opposite of Jalen Johnson, assuming Jalen Johnson is going to be 100% back to being normal Jalen Johnson. Is Tyreek Stevenson? Is it Terrell Smith, who I loved coming out of Minnesota, but unfortunately he hasn't been able to stay healthy? Is it?
And they also said in the chat that it was patellar tendon that.
So it's similar to what Ozzie does. Now he got it early in the year, obviously.
Yeah.
Now he comes back. That's a tough injury, guys, to come back with, especially at cornerback where you have to stop and start and all that stuff. So I pray and hope that Terrell Smith comes back healthy and he's good to go. but that's a question mark there as well, right? Joao Frazier is a guy that they like a lot, obviously in the 5th round. Al Harris likes him a lot.
Haven't seen him at
But
all yet.
we saw him in OTAs and he was gone. And
Yeah.
obviously there's some personal stuff he was dealing with, and hopefully that's all resolved. But for me, there's a lot of question marks there, right? For me, it's the defensive line. I agree. That's the top priority. I think corner, is right there, for me in terms of, getting something there in case Tyreek Stevens doesn't come through, or in case Terrell Smith is not healthy. I know they have some other guys on the roster, so we'll see how that goes, but maybe they feel better about their depth there. But again, going back to what we talked about originally, you fix out that pass rush, you can get away with corners that aren't the greatest, right? But until that pass rush is fixed, and we see a consistent quarterbacks getting bulldozed and dropped on their asses by that front four. You need some guys that can help at least that pass rush by slowing down at the line of scrimmage and staying in phase and being sticky in coverage.
Well, I got one more corner to cover, and then I took some questions from the chat that I started earlier that we're going to go over, and then we'll close this thing on out. The final one is Devin Moore out of Florida. Again, fits the size that they kind of look for at the corner position. Yeah,
Devin Moore is an intriguing prospect. Again, you talk about the size, right? You got it, 6'3", 198, almost 32-inch arm length there. Ran a 4.5 40, 1.56, 10-yard split, 34-inch vertical. These are all at his pro day there at Florida. Highly touted kid coming out of high school, 4-star prospect. Chose Florida over schools like Alabama, Notre Dame, Auburn, LSU. So this is a kid everyone, all the big programs were after. So he absolutely chose Florida. Two-year starter for the Gators, just 17 starts. We'll get into his positives here first. Terrific size we talked about there. Quick, quiet feet. This is a guy that's smooth in his back pedal, can flip his gate open and run with the receivers downfield. Physical at the line of scrimmage, when he's in press coverage, loves to get into his hands onto the receiver, slow him down, or even post snap. This kid's all up in the grills of these receivers. So, you like that about him, you like the size, you like the physicality. Obviously, I think that's going to be something that's going to, for that Bears coach staff, that's going to kind of stick out there in terms of the tape. The negatives, though, more of a straight line athlete, right? Meaning that, he runs that, he's a north and south kind of athlete. When you ask him to change direction real quick, a little bit of a hesitation there. Transition out of his back pedal is a bit choppy. So, there's some makeup time there where he's going to have to get better, a little more smoother out of there. Ball production has not been much in terms of what to talk about. Only 5 interceptions for his career. Now, the big thing, though, is injuries, right? This kid's been, that's one of the reasons why he only has, his 2-year starter only has 17 starts under his belt. Suffered a variety of injuries while playing for the Gators. 2022 through 2024 2022 and 2024 suffered season-ending shoulder injuries that both required surgery. So that's an issue there. 2023 missed games because of a groin and also back injury. So he's been dealing with a lot of injuries there in his career with Florida. And typically, obviously, the medicals are very important with Devin Moore. But typically, if a kid can't stay healthy in college, it's hard to see them staying healthy at the next level. I'm not saying it can't be done. But that's one of the reasons why I think you can see a Devin Moore available in day 3 of the draft. So, if day 1 and 2 has gone by and just the board didn't fall the way they wanted and they fulfilled, other positional, needs and all that stuff, and they still have still looking for a cornerback, day 3, I think Devin Moore could be a guy that they could plug in there and just kind of bring him in here and give him a shot and see how he can develop. But yeah, intriguing guy with that size, speed combination, physical at the line of scrimmage. I think those are going to be all traits that stick out on tape for Dennis Allen. So Devin Moore has a shot of being a Bear if he's still available late day 3, and if the Bears haven't fulfilled that need at corner with our day 1 and day 2 picks.
Is the 4.5 40, is that questionable at all, or would you be fine with that?
He's a straight line athlete. I think you see that on his tape. It's just when you ask him to kind of make quick change of direction in the open field, that's where you can see him kind of get in trouble there. So I like him a lot as a press corner at the line of scrimmage. You can always work on in terms of speeding up his timing in terms of when to transition. You can kind of get him better in terms of studying in the film room and kind of helping him utilize other ways to be able to be quicker on the field if he is he's got some lower body stiffness. So I think that's something that he can clean up. So I think he could be a guy that could develop, but. Yeah, it's the injuries are a concern for me at least. It's a major concern, right? Two shoulder injuries, two separate shoulder injuries,
Right.
both required surgery. So is that something that's going to be able to kind of maintain his health here playing in the NFL? He's got a rib injury, also a back injury, also a groin injury as well. So he's been battling some stuff here with Florida. So I think that's going to be part of the reason why you see a kid like Devin Moore maybe drop into day 3 of the draft.
Yeah, sounds like it, man. He's been going through it. I got some questions here from the chat.
Let's do it.
We already covered the Proctor thing. I had that one started on here. Aldo asked this earlier. I don't know if he's still in the chat or not, but he says, "What do you guys think of Shamar Turner? What are your expectations?" We've talked about him before. They kind of kicked him outside last year. I don't know if that was because of the Dio injury or if that's where they see him. I've got me personally. I have high hopes for Shamar Turner. I feel like you want him to step into that role because Javon Dexter, we're still talking about get off with him. He's in his 4th year as a pro. I mean, who knows? Maybe draft night, you talk about trying to find a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick. Maybe Javon Dexter's playing for somebody else next year, and we got a draft pick, and Shamar Turner really has to step in there. I know he's coming off injury, but what are your thoughts on Shamar?
Yeah, do you guys remember when did he tear his ACL? I know was it mid-season?
I think it was the first month of maybe around Halloween. I'm not positive about that.
So the only reason I ask is because, and I should know this, but for some reason I forgot it right now. But it takes generally a year for a player to get back from that to be 100%, right? It's usually a 9-month recovery, probably on the field. So he'll probably be on the field early on in the season, and then. So in terms of my expectations for him, as I think he really kind of started to come on a little bit in terms of when they moved him out to defensive end. Obviously, he played that at Texas A&M, and then they kicked him inside. The thing about him was he was so twitchy, so quick, so physical at the point of attack as a defensive tackle at Texas A&M. I think that's one of the reasons why they liked him so much. At this point, assuming he's fully healthy, I think you throw him back in the competition there. And I think also, you can tell a lot by what the Bears think of in terms of where he's at in recovery, in terms of where they might use him, but how the Bears attack the draft, right? If they go, defensive tackle, and kind of ignore the edge position or defensive end, then you can kind of see, all right, they're probably, have plans of him playing more of a defensive end and have these new, draft picks play inside defensive tackle. If they do go for a base end like Zion Young or one of those bigger guys, I think then you could see, thank you, Cliff. Then you could see if they're going more defensive ends, in terms of, drafting, then you could probably see them maybe, they're thinking of him being inside a defensive tackle. So yeah, at this point, you just want him to be back healthy. I think he's getting more comfortable as the season went along. And numbers weren't there in terms of sack and all that stuff, but you could see him being effective in terms of run defense, right? I think even Ben Johnson a couple of times, mentioned him in his press conference in terms of, some of the struggles they were having midseason there in terms of stopping the run. And then there was a period there where they got a little bit better. I think he credited, Shamar Turner for kind of stepping in there at defensive end and setting that edge. And that's one of the things where I look at these defensive end prospects, and that's key. And that's important for not only for Dennis Allen, but also for the staff. Like they want those defensive ends to be able to set that hard edge, to be able to funnel everything, the run game back inside to the big guys. And that's why, guys like Malachi Lawrence and some of these undersized guys, I just don't see them fitting into that scheme in that way, right? So, again, then going back to what they like and all that stuff, I think that's where you have to kind of see, in terms of how to utilize them. But yeah, hopefully he gets back, being healthy and get back in there. But the versatility is only a plus, right? If you can play interior defensive three technique and then kick out to be a defensive end, that's only going to help you, maintain your position, on the roster. Now, in terms of do I see him challenging for a starting spot? I don't. At least not this year, especially coming off the injury. Maybe in the future. Obviously, you hope in the future he takes over, one of those positions up front. Obviously, a 2nd-round pick. You want to see that. So, but I think the injury obviously was unfortunate for him. Just when he was, looking like he was feeling more comfortable there as part of that rotation, and then obviously, he's lost the year. So, hopefully, it comes back, and then he can be part of their, part of their core that kind of rotates in and out. So, I think the draft for me will tell me a lot in terms of what they like. Or what they think about some of these players, right? We talked about earlier. They draft a 1st-round tackle, left tackle. Unfortunately, tells me a lot about what they think about Ozzie and his future, right? Same thing if they kind of they go more interior, they go as opposed to going outside. I think that kind of tells me they're thinking maybe Shamar Turner maybe playing some defensive end.
It'd be somewhat disappointing if he can't push for a starting gig, though. I mean, it's the guy they used the second round pick on just a year ago. I feel like
yeah, you got to come some slack, right? You got to come something. He tore his ACL week 8. So that is a
I googled it, and when I said about Halloween, it was October 26th. So I was pretty close.
There you go. So about early on this season, he should be back to hopefully 100%, assuming there's no setbacks, right? So I think early on we can kind of see him maybe just kind of get back and get wet his beak a little bit, and then eventually after that, probably maybe we'll see a little bit more of him. Hopefully developing and hopefully becoming more of a force in there. And yeah, you would love to see him, jump up and take one of those positions, whether it's interior, D tackle, or even edge opposite of. Because I think Dio was. I remember he was November 9th, and I was in Achilles, so we don't know how he's going to be coming off.
He's motivated, is what I heard.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. He wants to double up that sack total of 1, make it 2. But anyway, I kid. Obviously, he got injured. Didn't really get off the ground there. So, I mean, I think they invested range of money into obviously the defensive line last year with Grady Jarrett and obviously Dio and some picks with Shamar Turner and something like that. But it just wasn't they didn't come to fruition, right? So hopefully this year they do that. But yeah, to me, that's why it's just I am so concerned about that defensive front, because that is something that it's got to be fixed somehow, some way.
For sure.
Some reinforcement, something. Just throw bodies at it. Dennis Allen loves throwing waves at these quarterbacks and the offensive linemen. You got to give them some bodies that can run the system and be effective. So hopefully we do that.
The next question is from Cliff Victoria. I think you may have answered this earlier, but I can't remember. Yep. What's your ideal choice at 25, and do you expect us to trade down?
Cliff, real quick, ideal choice. I have 2 guys: the Keldrick Falk, edge out of Auburn, or if they go inside, Keenan McDonald, defensive tackle from Ohio State. Those are my 2 guys. If they're there at 25, either one of those guys I'd be happy with. I think either one of those guys would come in and be part of the rotation early on in the season and then contribute. Obviously, Falk, 20-year-old kid, has some development to do, right? But I can put on his tape, and he's a guy that already, for me, is a pretty good run defender. Had 7 sacks 2 years ago, only 2 last year. Can he get him coached up there and to be a little more productive? Might not have the blazing quick first step as some of the other edge prospects does, but he's a pretty good athlete. I believe his number was a 4.7640 at the combine at his pro day. I forgot the 10-yard split though, but definitely a guy that intrigues me. I think Keldrick Falk fits everything in terms of what you want. Dennis Allen wants, I should say, in a profile, long length, athletic. A guy that could be a run stopper, a run defender day one, and potentially become a better pass rusher. And then Falk McDonald for me is a guy that inside, he's a guy that occupies blockers, can be a force on the defense in terms of run stopping. I always go back to that game against the 49ers, and also that first Packers game where the Bears could not stop the run. And I think you got to reinforce that. And I know they made some free agent additions, but I'm sorry, these are more guys like for me, they're camp bodies. They're guys that can give you some depth on the roster so in terms of backups, not guys that can come in here and be your run stoppers, right? So those are my 2 guys there. If I'm focused, if none of those guys are there, assuming that they're both gone for whatever reason, then you got to take a look and see what best player is, right? I don't think they're going to take it. They're going to draft a left tackle, but I know if they brought in Lomu from Utah for a 30 visit as well. That could be an option there if they do decide, if the Ozzie injury is worse than what we, have come to know or what's been reported so far. The one intriguing player or position, as I say, is receiver. I think the Bears are going to surprise again by drafting another receiver, and whether it's first round, I don't know, but I think it's a position that's going to be a high pick. I don't know if it's going to be one of the second round picks, but keep an eye on receiver. And next week, we're going to be talking on our show here real quick. We're going to be doing I'm about some of the receivers that I feel like bring that element that he wants. He wants explosive element on that offense. He wants an explosive playmaker in that room. And I think we're going to talk about some of those players next week here on the show. That's the group we're going to be profiling here next weekend.
Yeah, receivers, running backs, and playmaking type.
Guys that I can see that I can see be playmakers. Yeah, I think those are definitely going to be. I think receivers going to be a higher selection than a lot of people are anticipating. Just like Luther Burden was last year. Obviously, I think there's more of an emphasis this year because of the loss of DJ Moore. I think they want to add some more playmaking to that room. So keep an eye on.
Don't sleep on Jedi Walker either, man. He's been.
I like Jedi Walker, but it's one of those things where he's an undrafted free agent. You kind of have to come in and prove it and do it right for him to kind of cement that spot. So I know they talked about Khalif Raymond. When they signed him as being like a third receiver, that guy's been a punt returner, kickoff returner for most of his career. He's a tail end of his career. Do you really expect him to be your number 3 receiver? And I know they have Colson Loveland's probably going to be their number 1 or number 2 receiver, so it's not like they're lacking for weapons. But
yeah,
I do want someone, and I think Ben Johnson agrees. I think he wants someone that can challenge the defense vertically. They don't have that speed, right? And that's what I'm looking for coming into next week's show here as a preview next Monday's Draft on Tap is looking for these guys. Not necessarily just blazers, but receivers that can also be vertical threats and also on those crossers, right? You'll be able to kind of separate and get some room there and then make a play with the football in their hands as well. So those are the players we're going to highlight next week here on Draft on Tap.
KQ is bringing one up right here that I've been.
He's going to be on there. He's going to be on that. That's the I want to say Navy running back.
Navy, yeah. Well,
So,
that leads us into our next question. Howie came in late. He says, just got here. Have we talked about Landon Robinson yet? He's going to go before 129. Do you get him at 89? This is a guy who, as an Army guy, I watched him in the Army-Navy game. Him and Heidenreich kind of wrecked that whole game. He's kind of a shorter defensive tackle, but he's a monster in the middle.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he's at under 6 feet. I think
he's like 5'11", yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think that's going to fly in the DA system, but I don't think he's going to go. To be honest with you, I don't think he's going in the day 1 or day 2. I think he's probably a day 3 pick. If I'm in terms of what I'm kind of gathering, and he's a guy that, again, the Army guys and Navy guys, there's always these service commitment and all that stuff you got to deal with there too. But they're physically, I don't think he fits into a lot of what DA likes to do. Now, you want to add athletic ability and defense, and we talk about Zane Durant and some of the other guys you can take. Proctor, he fits that kind of profile, right? A guy that could be a twitchy, up the field kind of penetrator. But I think I'd rather take a chance on one of those 2 guys before I take a flyer on Landon Robinson. But I could be wrong. We'll see. It takes one team to love him, and
that's true.
It could be one team that could love him that much, and they could take him in the 3rd round. But for me, I think he's a day 3 guy. Early on, there was talk about him being a priority free agent, but obviously, I think he's gotten to the point now where he's raised his stock where he's going to get drafted. I think it's day 3. We'll see what happens.
He's small, but he's strong as an ox, man, and he's quick too. But I mean, he doesn't exactly fit. I get what you're saying because I mean we've talked about the size he likes at the edge. It's no different in the inside as well. How he popped this one into, I couldn't remember. I know we talked about him a little pre-show. I couldn't remember exactly what you said about it. His round 5 steal is Jalen Husky, the Maryland safety. He said he can play corner or strong safety in the box. Last year, 50% of snaps was deep at free safety, rotational guy at all 3 positions. He says #excellent value.
Yeah, this is the thing I was talking about. AC, I'm like there was someone asked about Jalen Husky from Maryland in the chat. It might have been Howie, maybe it was someone else as well. But I got some tape on him. I believe. Let me check my email real quick, guys. Give me a second here. I think I got some tape on him. I didn't have any tape up until now. So what I'll do is I will give you guys a report on Husky next week. Howie, come back next Monday. I know we're going to be talking about receivers and all that stuff, but I'll give you the Jalen Husky breakdown next week because I promised that to you for this week, but I just couldn't get my hands on any tape. Let me just see my email if it's here. 1 second. Sorry about this. Yep, I have some tape on him from.
Okay. Sweet.
So I'll be able to give you a little bit of a better breakdown on Husky next week. But yeah, in terms of corner / safety, I know he started a handful of games there as a cornerback, and then also moved over to safety. So here's his preliminary numbers here. His collegiate career actually at Bowling Green, Played 2 years there at Bowling Green. And then from there, transferred to Maryland. The last 2 years he was at Maryland. He's made 22 starts, 4 at corner and 18 at safety for Maryland. So I'll have a little bit of more in-depth breakdown for you next week there, Howie. So keep me honest, please. If I do forget, I know we're going to be talking about a whole different position group, but that's going to be the Monday before the draft. So we're going to go as long as you guys want us to go in terms of everyone in the chat and participation. So Howie, please join us next Monday. And if I do forget, keep me in check and remind me about Jalen Husky, and I'll have some more of a detailed breakdown of him for you next week.
Yeah, I'm not going to get much sleep next week. It'll be we're going to go over playmakers. We're going to cover some guys that people are asking for in the chat, and Draft on Tap's going to run a little mock draft next week. Danny, I know it's not your thing, but I'm going to need your input.
Guys. He's been bothering me all this whole time. I'm like, all right, we'll do a mock draft, and I'll even give him the first pick. I'll give him the first pick, and then I'll let him do it, and then I'll just kind of bounce off of him with the other picks. So we'll see how this goes. It should be fun. We'll like to, obviously we want everyone to participate in the chat if you can. So next Monday, 7 p.m. It's going to be the week of the draft. So obviously we're getting down to the nitty-gritty there. So besides talking about some explosive playmakers and receiver and running back, we're also going to be doing a mock draft here where AC will have the first pick in round 1 for the Bears. And we're only doing the Bears picks, guys. We're not doing an entire mock, just doing Bears picks only. First, 3 rounds we said? Right,
I think we should get the up to the pick 89.
Yeah, we'll do the first 3 rounds, and we'll let you guys kind of in on how the sauce is made here, how we think moving forward. So that should be fun. And then obviously again, Howie, please jump back in and remind me about Jalen Husky. I'll give you a breakdown on him.
Absolutely. And I got one final question that kind of wraps this thing up and kind of teases a little bit of shows for the ballroom here tomorrow, where Cliff asks, what does Danny think about the Beast, the 600-page draft coverage by Dane Brugler on The Athletic, and how much work goes into it? What are your thoughts on the Beast? I know you're not you trust your own eyes, but what are your thoughts on
Cliff? So first of all, Dane is one of the best ones out there in the business. He puts a lot of work into it. We've had Dane on previous Draft on Taps. Aldo and I have had him, so mad respect to him. Yeah, it does a good in-depth coverage in terms of the player and all that. But like AC said, I don't read anybody else's work because I don't want anyone else's to kind of get anything into my head. And so I have a preconceived notion about a player. So I like to go ahead and do the tape, do the player, do my report, do my breakdown, have my rankings before if I have a chance to go back and take a look. I think I've looked into the Beast like a couple of times, but I have not done it so far this year, or I don't think I looked into it last year. I can't remember, but yeah, I mean, hats off to Dane. Does a tremendous amount of work. I know he's going to be. I think he's going to be on this week's
tomorrow
with Greg Gabriel. Yep. So tune in for that. Greg's going to have Dane on, and obviously, if you're available, Cliff, jump on and ask some questions. But yeah, that's. Breaking these guys down, it's time consuming. Trust me. A lot of people in my life, they know that from January to end of April that I am very limited in terms of time, in terms of social events, stuff like that. And I can just imagine being a full-time NFL scout. When I was looking into getting into the business, I was told by a veteran scout that be prepared to be away from your home and family for almost 300 days of the year, right? So it's a lot of time and dedication. So to do this, you must love to do this, and that's one of the things why I do it. I love doing this. I love breaking down prospects, looking into their background, the history, and all that stuff. And then for me, especially, it's a little bit easier. The one thing with Dana, he does a report for general report that covers all teams. He's not focused in on the Bears. Right. So like for me, what I do is I take a look at a player and I take a look at measurables, height, dimensions, productivities, obviously tape. That's the most important thing. And then I see do they fit either the defense or the offensive scheme, and then I make a judgment there, and then I move on. So case in point, Ruben Bain. I didn't even watch his tape. First of all, he's going to be gone in the first 15 picks. Second thing is, even if he was available, I don't know, and I'm not being funny here. I don't know if Dennis Allen would want Ruben Bain. because of some of the stuff we talked about, right? In terms of now he's physical as hell. That's not a problem. But he's got a criteria in terms of what he likes in measurables, and Ruben Bain does not fit any of DA's measurables. So that's one guy that if the Bears had a top 10 pick, I'd be struggling with. How does this guy fit? Does he fit? You watch a tape, you love the player based off of tape, but you also know that he would be an outlier, a defensive man with that type of length in terms of arm length to make it in the NFL. So that's a little bit of a little sample in terms of what I'm talking about. But I focus strictly on the Bears. I have a pretty good feel for what they like and what they need. So I try to find players that, in my opinion, kind of fit that profile as well. So obviously, I'm not saying the Bears board matches my board. Their board could be totally different, but the one thing that I wish I had that I don't have from this side of the scouting community, if you will, is the access to the medicals and B, the personal stuff, right? Like that's you guys. I think I've said this multiple times. I know Greg has said it multiple times, but getting to know the player, that's why these school visits for these scouts, it's very key in the evaluation. None of us see it, none of us hear about it generally, right? But getting to the school and talking to the administrators, talking to the faculty, talking to the people that sometimes even like the janitors and stuff like that, finding out how does this kid act on a day in, day out basis? What is his personality? Do you see him, stuff like that, the stuff that scouts have access to, and obviously the medicals as well. And the interviews too, the interview process, getting to know the kid and seeing how he reacts to, questions you ask him, whether it's personal questions or football related questions. Those are things that also go into the evaluation process that I unfortunately don't have access to. So that's why some players that just based off of their tape, their stats, their measurables, and the scheme fit, for me are ranked higher on my board if I'm scouting for the Bears. But there's other things that they have, information they have, which is interaction, the medicals, the other stuff that they've gotten from behind the scenes that also go into their grade, and that's why we could differ. But that's the only thing I wish I had access to that after I don't have.
Well, they had something pop up with Ruben Bain this week about a car accident a couple years back where the girl passed away. It seems like the family has no ill will toward him, but that's just some of the things that we don't have access to that comes out, seems to come out like draft week and affect these players' stocks. I will say, Cliff,
that was a shady thing done by someone's agent. Because so NFL teams, and again, Greg has already talked about this. So some of the stuff you guys might have ever heard, that NFL teams have private investigators. So a lot of these guys, they get down to, we used to see them at the Senior Bowl when they used to come in their, basically their underwears, and we'd see them, fully on no shirt on, no pants on, just underwears, and we'd see like the tattoos. So what I'm trying to get to is the NFL teams have pictures of any sort of tattoo, anything that they could see. They run it by their private investigator or whatever firm they use, and they see it. Well, is there any sort of gang affiliation? Well, what does this tattoo mean? So those are things that they break down, and they dig into, and they find more. So all this stuff. So from what I've heard, this is stuff that I was already known about. But that's that story about Ruben Bain. So it's not a surprise to the NFL community. It's a surprise to the fans because that just popped kind of this week, and I think that's, again, for me, that's shady because I think someone is trying to do the kid dirty, in my opinion. The story hadn't leaked, and all of a sudden they want to kind of put it out there and to see if they can hurt the kid's stock even more. Sometimes I think it's a shady work by the agent. It could be a team. It could be a team that says, "Hey, man, Ruben Bain is going to drop."
Trying to get him to fall to him, huh?
Right. I've heard that. I've seen that happen before as well. So I just think it's you don't mess with it. Just like the biggest example was the Laramie Tunsil thing. The night of the draft, when the draft already started, the whole video gets leaked of him with the gas mask, doing weed and all that stuff. And I think if I remember correctly, that was a family relative that leaked that to hurt him.
I thought he was smoking at a frat house or something, and it got released.
There was an internal, I think, family fight or something like that, and then they released it the day of the draft to hurt his stock. Now he ended up going from a top 5 pick to a top 13 pick. He's had a long career. He's made a lot of money, so good for him. But he's going to overcome it. But stuff like that really hurt. It pisses me off, to be honest with you, if I'm being quite frank, because these kids have done everything they can to get to the point of being drafted, and then you're going to try and get somebody like that and just hurt. Yeah. Now, if the kid is a bad kid, in the case of Ruben Bain, I have not heard anything in terms of him being a bad person off the field. Again, that was the thing. Going back to Jalen Carter, that was one of the bigger things that kind of concerned a lot of teams. That's why he dropped to number 9, and why the Bears passed on him the first time was some of that character stuff. And to the most part, Carter's worked out, but there's some stuff that we see on the football field that kind of now I see why there's some concerns by other teams. So things like that get fished out. It's rare. The NFL teams and scouts don't already know this stuff, so that the whole Ruben Bain thing, teams already knew about it. So again, it's rare that they don't know all this stuff. For a team to be caught blindsided by something like that, just means that they're not doing their due diligence in terms of digging into these prospects. So, that to me was just a shady thing to do.
And it doesn't seem like there was a DUI or anything involved in it. So
I think it was our settlement or our cases closed. I forgot what the whole thing was, but
Cliff said he was charged with careless driving, and it was later dropped.
Yeah.
So,
but someone did pass. I believe his passenger did pass away.
It was I believe it was. She was in a different vehicle, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But just to wrap this thing up, Cliff, I am a subscriber to The Athletic. I actually dropped my subscription last year, and then when the Beast dropped, I think it was last Tuesday, they had a deal where it was like $10 for the year. So I went ahead and bought that again so I could read the Beast because, as you know, I'm a draft nerd. So I like to dig in and but like you, Danny, I go for what the Bears could use, but I like to get the deep dive that he does. And I mean, he's got little tidbits in there of stuff they did in high school.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of years ago where I read one of them, and I was like, it was going back to like grammar school and high school and stuff like that. I mean, he has a I mean, I don't know what the resources are. Whatever it is, it's like I said, he does a great job of breaking that down. So I do remember that a couple of years ago. But yeah, for me, like personally, I just want a clear mind when I want the tape to talk to me. I want the tape.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. What the player does, what the player cannot do. Again, so that's the thing. That's why for going back to real quick, I don't want to, I know it's a 2-hour show so far tonight, but going back to, that's why quarterback for me is such a hard position to scout. Just from looking at the tape, because you can see, all right, this guy's 6'5", 220, he can throw the ball through the wall, he's got accuracy, blah, blah. But then how does he act outside the football field, right? How is his character outside the football? That's one of the things that scared me about Caleb initially coming out, was something that I heard from other people in the scouting community was like, does he love the game?
He was at Coachella last weekend, so
that's different. But is he a mean person, or is he a me person, or is he a we person? That's the kind of stuff that questions that are coming out about Caleb. I think so far he's answered that. I think Ben Johnson influenced him. It's kind of helped him, right? So I think that's something. And in terms of Coachella, he's a 25, 24-year-old kid. Absolutely. I mean, if I'm a 24-year-old kid, multimillionaire, and I could go hang out with some pretty women, I would do that as well. But I'm not. I'm here. I am committed to a girlfriend. I don't have the opportunity to do that. I won't do that. So, but he's a 25-year-old kid just living his life, So and now stay away from the Kardashians. I would tell him, stay the hell away from the Kardashians.
They kept saying that he was there with the Kardashians, but
I think it was
he wasn't even engaging with them. They have the same sponsor,
thing, right? Yeah, there's a sponsor that they're all kind of, and they gave him that that little VIP section. And so I don't think he's. I just want to know. I just want to let him know. Stay the hell away from the Kardashians. Bad luck.
Look at what they did to Lamar Odom and Kanye.
Lamar almost died, for crying out loud. I mean, that's it's bad. So, but that's my PSA to Caleb Williams. Not that he needs it, not that he's actually listened to me, but that's what I was saying from the Kardashians.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, just like KQ says, looking forward to Dane, Greg, and Aldo tomorrow. Like, comment, and subscribe to the Ballroom Radio Network and to Shimon Draft Scout on YouTube. Yep. And if you hit the notification bell, you'll see tomorrow Dane Brugler, the author of The Beast, will be on with Greg Gabriel, or another of our local scouts here at the Ballroom Radio Network. So that'll be a great show. If you can't catch it live, you can always catch it on demand on YouTube, or Aldo does a great job getting the audio put up from these shows on Spotify or wherever you catch your podcasts. from. But until next week, and we're going to go long next week too, Danny, because it's
And
draft season.
Just a FYI for showing Draft Scout, guys, the videos are going to start coming. I know there's about like a week and a half lull there but I just dropped my Dylan Thieneman video last night. I got some safeties coming up here. We're going to talk about something that we've already talked about, something we haven't covered here. Those are going to be coming out here as well. The corners will be coming out following that. And then obviously, next week is the draft. So I'm kind of trying to get as much content out there as possible. So, like, subscribe, or, and hit the notify button on Streamyard Draft Scout. And whenever one of my videos comes up, hopefully you guys can go out and watch it and enjoy, please.
Absolutely. Until next week, Danny, we'll just leave everybody with a
love the hats. Tally hats. Get those. Brandon, thank you for the hoodie. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
The logo on the back here as well. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Tallybrand.com. Get your hats, shirts, and just like you said, shout out to Brandon Lawson for the hoodies.